Welcome back to Physical Mao. Now, in a world where advanced camera apps for iPhone come packed to the gills with customization options, pages of menus, and as many settings on screen as possible, there's one app that stands out for taking a very different approach. That app is, of course, Halide. With its stripped back UI and ultra clean design, Halide doesn't look like an advanced camera app. It looks better. Everything stays out of the way until you need it, and when I say everything, this is pretty much all you get. Don't be fooled though. Its beautifully designed UI makes Halide seem far more basic than it actually is. This is no baby app, a mere stepping stone up to the big boys. It has manual exposure controls, raw shooting, a live histogram, depth mode, focus peaking. Basically, Halide has it where it really matters. But what's the point of an advanced camera app that doesn't have reams of settings, options, and menus? Well, for the developers, Ben and Sebastian, not having those things is the whole point. When they released Halide back in May 2017, designer Sebastian wrote, "The built-in camera app is a little too simple, while advanced camera apps feel like an aeroplane cockpit. We needed an elegant app for deliberate and thoughtful photography. So we built Halide." And that design philosophy shines through in every aspect of the way Halide looks and feels. But design isn't just about how something looks, it's also about how it works. You'd probably imagine with Halide being so clean and simple, it's also very efficient to use. And you'd be right. Because not only does it look better than its contemporaries, it also works more efficiently thanks to this wonderful quick bar you can open and close like a little drawer. The quick bar allows you to display and access everything Halide has to offer in a few taps and swipes, and you can make it even more efficient by customizing it. When it comes to shooting, Halide has tap to focus and alignment guides which all give you haptic feedback. To adjust exposure, Halide uses a fluid gesture-based system where you swipe to change exposure settings in both auto and manual. Tap AF or swipe across to access the manual focus adjustment slider, which can be used with the bright and detailed peaking to help you quickly and accurately set the focus. Basically, from the moment I raise my phone to the point I'm ready to tap the shutter, Halide is definitely the fastest and most efficient advanced camera app I've ever used. And in case you haven't noticed, I've been demonstrating it all completely one-handed. But Halide isn't perfect. There are some little niggles with how it works and its performance. Take the autofocus, for example. Most of the time it's reliable and locks on fine, but it can also be a little inconsistent and sometimes fails or misses completely in seemingly easy situations where other apps have no problem. Tapping autofocus also resets the shutter speed while in manual mode, which can be a little bit annoying. It also crashes and shows errors quite a lot, so I have to relaunch it multiple times per day. One of the reasons for using an advanced camera app like this is to get away from the Apple computational magic and take control of your photos. However, in order to create those sweet shallow depth of field effects, you need some of that Apple computational magic, as the iPhone sensor is far too small to do it the old-fashioned way. Enter depth mode. Depth mode is very cool as it allows you to create shallow depth of field effects on both human and non-human subjects. Now, advanced camera apps taking advantage of Apple's depth mapping API to create shallow depth of field photographs of non-human subjects is becoming more commonplace. but Halide's implementation is by far the best I've seen. Halide will actually show you the depth map and the portrait effects matte mask, which is very cool. You can see the massive difference in detail between the standard depth map and the portrait effects matte. The portrait effects matte is far more precise, as you can see, but it's only been trained to recognize human faces, so it doesn't work on non-human subjects. And that's why depth effects on objects don't work nearly as well. All this means depth mode is far from perfect, but it's not Halide's fault, as the app is simply tapping into the information it has access to from the iPhone and iOS. iPhones all have different camera systems and each one calculates depth differently, so your results will vary. And there's one more thing with depth mode actually worth mentioning. You probably didn't invest in Halide to take selfies, but bear with me because this is pretty cool. The front-facing cameras on all full-screen iPhones use the True Depth camera system, which has all of these other little sensors and technology that are used for Face ID. And that means you have access to a lot more detailed depth information, which allows you to create and view these really cool AR images. If you want to try this out for yourself, just be aware of the sheer computational horsepower needed for depth. Most of Halide's crashes come from this mode, but I can forgive it because my iPhone XR's RAM and CPU are probably to blame as well. But as cool as depth mode is, RAW is probably the main reason you're interested in Halide. And this is where that exposure and color histogram comes in so handy. When you're shooting in RAW, you don't get a live view of what the RAW file looks like. There's just too much information to compute, so it's best to keep an eye on the histogram, not only for exposure, but also ensuring that you're preserving detail in the right colors as well. RAW files are beasts, but once captured, Halide handles them very quickly and only starts to buffer and slow down if you spam the shutter around 35 times. Halide can show you both your JPEG and RAW file instantly, but you can't edit photos at all in Halide. In order to properly take advantage of the power of RAW, you have to edit photos in an app that can handle that file, like Lightroom or Darkroom. This isn't a big deal though, because if you're using an app like Halide and shooting in RAW, then you're probably already using editing software as well. Halide itself would rather you use its sister app, Darkroom, and it's actually worth a look because it gives you the ability to alter the amount of blur and edit the foreground and background separately in depth photos, which isn't something you can do in Lightroom. So, should you get Halide over all of the other advanced camera apps out there? Well, with Halide, you have control over your focus, exposure, and some guides to help you, and that's it. That might make Halide seem basic compared with its contemporaries, but using it really makes you think about what you actually need from an advanced camera app and from an actual advanced camera. Because when you take a moment to think about it, how many features and functions do you actually use? For me, the 80-20 rule seems to apply. With other advanced camera apps, I find myself using 20% of the features 80% of the time. But with Halide, I find myself using all of the features all of the time and rarely wanting for more. Halide is about getting the settings and menus out of the way and allowing you to focus on what matters most, your photographs. Personally, I usually like having settings and options to be there when I need them and hidden away when I don't. But the amount of time I find myself in menus obsessing and worrying over things that don't matter to the final photograph instead of actually enjoying the process of photography is way more than it should be. Basically, when other apps are giving you every choice conceivable, Halide gives you no choice but to focus on and enjoy making photographs. And that is my review of Halide. If I've missed anything or there's anything else you'd like me to address or you just have a question, then of course leave me a comment and I'd be happy to get back to you. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Kjell